There you go.
Stop fiddling, John. You're making noise.
Oh, God. It's not a good start, is it?
No.
All right.
We recording?
Yeah, go. Hold on. There will come a day where we'll get it bang on.
Yeah.
But it's not this day.
We're still waiting for John to record his intro, aren't we?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I need a mic to do that, though.
You have a mic.
No, I don't.
Right there in front of you.
Episode
10.
10. Big 1-0.
Yeah.
We've made it.
Well, don't know about made it.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start how we always start.
Yeah.
And then we'll introduce the guest.
Yeah. So,
We've
how
got a
are
guest.
everyone?
Me first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing all right, actually. Yeah.
Good.
Haven't got much to complain about, which is good.
Week's been good?
Week's been good. Not trained. Oh, no, I have trained. Did I come to
You had your first Tuesday
Colour
class as well,
on
didn't you?
Monday?
Was this week your first Tuesday class? No?
You've tried to
Second.
say that for the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So I came to Colour class on Monday, which was good. Taught on Tuesday, which is always good. Didn't come Thursday because Catherine was working late, but I did come briefly to see John Harrison get his purple belt, which was cool.
Yeah.
You missed the
Applause.
opportunity to do
Applause.
Oh,
the
yeah,
applause.
applause. Yay, well done, John.
You're enjoying teaching again?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, I think it gives you a different kind of direction. When you're a student, you just kind of concentrate on your own stuff. But I think in order to teach something, you have to think about it slightly more. But yeah, love it.
Potentially not in the route that you would take with your own.
Yeah, you've got to think about it from another person's
Yeah.
perspective. And I've got a real spectrum of students in that, like in terms of experience and also stature. There's some really small. In fact, I've probably got the smallest and the biggest two students we've got come to that.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, all good. Thank
Didn't
you.
know John came to a Tuesday lunchtime.
Hey. Oh, wrong one. That one.
Mason, how you been?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah?
Pretty good. Yeah.
Busy with work?
Wind down to Christmas, so yeah,
Slowing down a bit.
not too bad. We're flat out, to be honest. But yeah, if I tell myself that we're winding down, then maybe it'll happen. Apart from that, yeah, training just normal, just consistently as much as I can.
You were stressed last week. You still stressed now?
I think I just live life in a state of stress.
It is life.
Yeah, but no, I'm all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, all good.
Nice.
Nothing really to report on my end.
Yeah. Nice.
Still no baby.
No.
So
Not
When's
yet.
that meant to be?
early Jan.
Early Jan.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. What
John,
about you, John?
how are you?
About the same. Probably with a little bit more sleep. So I'm getting better. I'm struggling to get sleep at the moment, but it's improving slowly.
Is there any particular reason why or
Everything.
everything?
Do you know what I do?
What?
Do you struggle to like shut off at night?
Yeah.
So I've got it's like a sleep band thing, and it's got headphones in it,
Okay.
and I just put that on and listen to podcasts because I
Really?
can't sleep. Otherwise, I'll just lie in bed and for hours just thinking about stuff.
Everything like work
Yeah.
and just whatever you're
Yeah.
doing the next day. And
Yeah. So Brooke found it for me a few years ago, and yeah, I've ever since that's what I use.
Yeah.
Just put that on, put a podcast on, and then fall asleep within 5 minutes normally.
This episode has been sponsored by.
Not yet.
I did occasionally a while ago, which Ashley used to take the mickey out of me for, was I used to put like whale noises on in the background because it's so soothing
Yeah.
and it's just relaxing.
Yeah.
And I do
It's
love-
like white noise, isn't it?
yeah.
Mm.
But
All right. But you're better than you were last week.
sleep-wise, yeah, that's about it. But
We'll
good.
work on that.
Yeah,
work on it.
we're
We're
working
getting
on
there.
it.
Yeah. All right. Let's do it.
Big one,
We have a guest.
big guest, old guest.
So for our 10th episode, we wanted to do something big,
Special.
like special-ish,
Yeah.
and so we asked someone else, but they said no. So we ended up with no. So we've got our like head coach, Byrne, on
Stephen.
the podcast. Stephen, yeah.
You may know him as Stephen Byrne.
Yes.
But we call him Bernie.
Yeah.
So welcome.
Welcome.
Hello. Can I just ask John to give us an example of his whale music?
Oh Jesus.
The sounds of his people.
That's why you can't sleep, mate, I think. We know the problem.
Do I just get you a bit nearer to the microphone?
Ooh, yes.
Just a touch. That's
How's
fine.
that?
Yeah,
fine.
that's
That's good.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is this all right?
Yeah,
This
No,
setup?
I do that with my
Okay.
headphones as well. That's fine.
So I think a good starting point really would be, due to the age difference between us, what was jiu-jitsu like back then?
Back in the day. Well, there is an age difference, isn't there? I think people forget that sometimes. At least it feels like it. What was jiu-jitsu like back in the day? Well, what do you want me to start with? When I started jiu-jitsu,
Yeah, like-
or when I just
Well-
started?
When did you first find jiu-jitsu?
Or
Okay.
let's start with, because you would have started other martial arts before jiu-jitsu, no?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah.
let's start there. So what
Well,
was your,
okay, I can tell you when I first heard about this thing that we now do
yeah.
most days of the week, right?
Yeah, I'd go from the start of the story.
All right. So I was at university. Wait for it. It was 1998.
I was 2.
I was at the University of North London, and opposite my halls of residence was an hour price. This is a shop you used to be able to go into to buy VHS and videos, right? And that's basically what I did as a student. To be fair, in that first year, I would go in there, and there was a Blockbuster video store around the corner on the Seven Sisters Road, but we would just rent videos, watch videos. And one day I was in the our price, and I just came across UFC 4, and I'd seen it on one of these late night TV shows. I think it was The Word or Passengers on Channel 4, sort of late night Friday night show, long since gone. And they had a little clip of it on there, and I was like, "What's this? This looks pretty crazy." I like it. It just sort of sparked my interest, and then probably within the next 6 months, I came across this VHS, and I just splashed the cash on it. I had my student loan, my hardship loan, and yeah, watched it, and straight away was just blown away. UFC 4, Hoist Gracie, for a bunch of marginally less well-trained athletes than you see today, but it was brutal. It was as billed, and we didn't know anything about it. So how he was winning with all these arm locks and chokes, triangle choke, he beats a guy called Dan Severn in the final, and I didn't. Yeah, the commentators didn't know what it was, let alone me watching it in my little flat in London. So I saw that, and straight away was like, this is cool. And I'd always liked combat. I'd done judo as a kid at the judo club in Newbury, where we currently train.
Which is quite cool, actually, because that's like a full circle,
Yeah.
thing, isn't it? Like, train there when you're a kid, and then all of a sudden you're then training your own school there.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
To go, in fact, yeah, that leads me to like when Newbury BJJ first went to the judo club, I went in to see them. I thought, rather than email and phone and stuff, I'll just go in there when they got a class on and see who's around. So I went in there, and the guy who was teaching the kids' class had his back to me, and in his rickety legs, judo knees, and he was a coach. I won't name him, but he taught me like nearly 40 years previously, or 30 years previously for sure. And he turned around and he just went, "All right, boy," like that, straight away. And we had a chat, and so it's full circle.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's great to be there. It's a great judo hall with a lot of tradition, a lot of history. So we're very lucky, I think, to have that. But yeah, so I started with judo when I was probably 7, I would say, something like that. And then
What started you doing that? Is it like, did any of your parents, or was it just like an interest that you had, or?
God, that's a good question. I don't know, to be honest. I think it was a popular sport to do at the time. Like, I played sport, so team sports, football. I was pretty good at football when I was young. Like, I never got much bigger after about 11. So secondary school football, everyone seemed to grow up, and I stayed the same. But at primary
It's like
school,
a lot of us, actually.
yeah, if you're not got beyond 5'7", that's probably you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's me. But I was pretty good at football at primary school level. Played for like different teams and stuff. And then Yeah, judo. I don't know. I think it wasn't. My parents were not into it. My dad played a bit of cricket, pretty poorly, as I recall. But you know, they wanted me to do interesting. I had a friend called Matthew Morgan who also did it, and a couple of other friends. So we kind of did it together. Yeah, but for a few years, probably a year or two, pretty regularly though.
I suppose at the time there probably wasn't that many martial arts offered out anyway. Not saying that it was that long ago, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. This would have been like this is like 1986 or something like that.
So you wouldn't have had like loads of jiu-jitsu clubs like now. Probably not many like kickboxing clubs and stuff like that.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, when you're 6 or 7, right? Your
just
parents drop you somewhere. I remember. I mean, I can remember the smell of the place. I remember a huge leather medicine ball they had in there, and just being fascinated as a 6-year-old, being fascinated by my inability to pick up a ball, really, and like all the workouts. We used to play Bulldogs, you know, as a warm-up game, which is loads of fun. You know, stuff that's banned now because it's essentially inherently dangerous to play these games in a room full of children. But that was, I don't know what I was missing out on, but I know what I did, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it as a martial art, I don't think, really. Just something to do, and I enjoyed it. I was quite good, you know, I would say straight away, quite good at the hold down stuff. Wasn't particularly good at the throws, but I was quite good at like Kesikatami.
So that's quite interesting as well then, that you then went on to jiu-jitsu sort of thing, because that's more of like, that's where like the judo people tend to cross over to jiu-jitsu with the hold down stuff, really.
Yeah, see that now for sure.
Yeah.
But I had big gaps then. I sort of stopped doing judo when I was pretty small, and then didn't do anything. I was always interested in boxing, and would like, you know, but I didn't train boxing till much later on. Then I did a bit of boxing as well, sort of thing, up at Apex Gym in Newbury, which became the ABA, where the ABA trained. I trained with them a few times, but not a lot. But it was just, we started doing a bit of boxing up there, but not.
So your real journey started after watching the UFC 4 on VHS?
Yeah, I would say so. So I like, definitely. In terms of, getting into it more and growing. That's where I sort of... Then? So after that, I was at uni. I had a punch bag hanging in a hallway, but, you know, no formal training. Not really. You know, the odd sort of fight on the street would happen, but untrained, not particularly smart. Mainly illegal moves.
Eye gouge, fish hooks.
Yeah, not quite that bad. But maybe the odd headbutt. But after I watched that UFC, I sort of knew I was into that, and the internet was kind of starting to come in then, and a few forums. So while I was at university, I joined the forums. There was like Sherdog was the main one. I had a handle on there called Zen Cuts. And I didn't post much, but I looked at stuff and got interested, and basically just did a load of historical research into what this was, and then found people online who were selling videos, right? So,
like instructionals?
No, not instructionals, like the actual events.
Oh, okay.
Because they weren't available, right? So I found this UFC, and then you'd search, and they just had that one.
Right.
So there was nothing else. But with the arrival of the internet, so that would be this. I've moved to Bristol by this point. And I say, a friend of mine, I didn't have a computer. I was still doing essays at university on paper, and this is like 99 into 2000 now. I did get a laptop at one point, but it was like an old Dell one that belonged to a company called Byrne in Newbury. In fact, it turned out that it had been, taken without its owner's permission. But that's another story. But it wasn't very good. It was basically a word processor at best. But other people had the internet, so I used their internet and joined this website, and then found someone who was selling videos, and then started ordering some videos. So that's when I started getting into like pride fighting, sort of got more into UFC. But not at this point. I wanted to train, but I wasn't training. It was just an interest in fighting, an interest in this art of MMA. But I didn't know anyone else who was into this. This was totally
So even like the flat members and stuff you were living with, it was just.
I mean, we'd watch it together. They were like, "Oh, this is cool." Like, you know, Pride Fighting was particularly interesting. Like, I'd bought a few videos, and yeah, people were like sucked in by it because it was exciting. Like, what is this? But they didn't then go off and go out and buy it and want to join the sites and so on. So I was sort of doing that in the background. You know, that was my sort of introduction, was just watching like a couch potato MMA fighter or whatever, you know what I mean? Like commentating from the sidelines, knowing nothing at all. And then when I finished university in 2002, I joined Clive Elliott's martial arts academy back in Newbury. So I moved back to Newbury, moved in with my partner, and then got into. I knew I was looking for somewhere, and I had a friend of mine who'd just not long been training. My friend Gareth, he had just been training with Clive. I can't think how long, but not long. But he was like, "You should do this. This is great." So I went along to a few sessions and just started training with Clive. So I trained with Clive regularly then, because he was a karate practitioner, but he was early uptaker, I would say. Certainly in Newbury, small town, market town, we didn't have a lot of opportunities for that, you know, not like being in a city. But Clive had done his diligence, you know, he'd trained a lot. I think he was about fifth dan in karate, but he'd been to the States, trained with Eric Paulson, Guru Dan Inosanto, so like real legends. And I was like, you know, a bit starstruck, to be honest. And his head coach, or his sort of main coach under him, was a guy called Tom Mays, who was just a savage. And he was like, you know, early uptaker of MMA. So they blended the styles. So we learned some grappling and kickboxing. Kickboxing was the main style. Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee sort of concepts, blending these arts together. It was like
which is still that style for him up until, you know, now, isn't it?
What, Clive? Yeah. So I think he does less grappling. I think he certainly headed in that direction and was into it. Not in the gi. This was just like MMA style. Well, even back then, we wouldn't call it no gi. So someone asked earlier, like, what's the biggest change in jiu-jitsu? Like, you just grappled, but it was MMA or there was jiu-jitsu, which was like, there was no jiu-jitsu. The only Brazilian jiu-jitsu club in the country that I was aware of was it like Hodges Place that had opened up in Ladbroke Grove.
And that would have been like gi.
That's all I knew.
Yeah.
There was no jiu-jitsu or MMA. So you're grappling for MMA. No one was talking about, oh, you do this, it's called no-gi. Don't remember that being a thing at all. Although most of the grappling we were doing was no-gi, it wasn't referred to as that. So yeah, I spent probably from 2002 till late 2006, sort of like four times a week probably training with Clive, and just, you know, kickboxing, and then training probably like 6 days a week in the gym. I just really enjoyed like learning to be a fighter. Really, that's what I kind of wanted to do. I was like, I like fighting, but then I never moved it beyond that in terms of from a competitive point of view. We had good sparring, hard sparring all the time. Tom Mays, our instructor, went and became the British amateur champion a couple of times in MMA. Fought Paul Daly, famous for UFC, and who else he fought for? Bloody everybody, right?
Yeah, and also for getting kicked out of the UFC as well, right?
Yeah. But he like, had famous fights with like Nick Diaz and people like that. So Tom fought him, beat him in an amateur competition. So Tom was like really, really well accomplished and skilled. So we were, you know, coming up under him, we would just get beatings. Honestly, I did anyway. And with Mason's dad joined, Brendan. Shout out to Brendan, who became, like, through my time at Clive's, my main training partner. Yeah. We were each other's main training partner. We went through, I started before him, but when he joined, we were sort of each other's pad holder, sparring partner. And we both sort of enjoyed the kickboxing side, but also like the grappling side. We were both into that as well. So we learned that from Tom mainly. We took a few trips here and there to other things. But we used to put the old grills on our face, you know, the head guards with the grilling, and like, you know, just do MMA. So it'd be headbutting each other, just elbows, just like ferocious. And I remember a couple of times being, crying under that head guard. We're just suffering that badly, but somehow leaving happy, and knowing it was, I was loving it, really. So this would have been like 2004, 2005, 2006. Yeah, so that was my sort of... I felt like by the time 2006 was rolling, 2007, I felt like I'd been in martial arts for about 5 years, training pretty regularly.
And you were going up through the ranks in what, kickboxing?
Yeah, in Clive Elliott's system. Yeah, so I reached the rank of red and black belt. He had a firm syllabus, a bit more traditional. You had to go and do some kata, and then you had to do some pad work, and then you had to do loads of exercises. So he made Tom was big on the exercise front, one of the fittest people you're going to ever meet.
Still today as well.
Still today, yeah. He's a kettlebell master, ridiculous. So, and then sparring, hard sparring. And then as you get through the ranks, you had to do more rounds every time you were going for a belt. And you basically you were just learning to get your head kicked in, basically. And Clive would always be like the end of level boss. So you kind of you get to round 9 and you're done, and you have to do some tie drills, and then Clive comes in and just kicks you in the head, knees you in the liver. But it was all good. That was how it was. It was tough comparatively to other schools. I think it was especially for around here, it was way beyond other stuff that was happening. I think the people who were training at that time were really good. There were some good training partners, tough people. So you did get a good beating and a great sense of technical knowledge in the stand-up realm, especially. But with the people who were going out and training, I say Eric Paulson, I took some trips. The first time I trained in the gi then would have been around about 2003, 2004. Took a trip to Hodges Place at Ladbroke Grove with my friend Gareth, and actually got a class. It was literally walked in. I think Nick Gregoridis was a blue belt there. Obviously didn't know him, but it was who's this guy? He was obviously good, young.
But at the time, to see a blue belt would have been... Was that still quite a...
Oh, I hadn't seen... This is the first time I'd even been in a jiu-jitsu gym.
Oh, yeah,
so I had no idea. I didn't know what So we got there, and Hodge had taught us a private, me and Gareth.
Wow.
So he taught us armbar from mount.
Was this
and a
the
hip
first
escape.
time you had put a gi on?
First time, except for my judo days, judo gi, as they're called. But yeah, first time in a long time I put a gi on, which they loaned us. And yeah, essentially didn't really know what we were getting. But looking back, it was wow, we basically had a private. And he just taught armbar from mount and a hip escape from side control. And we took that back to our club, and straight away you could sort of implement those things and we're doing better. So we took a couple of trips there. I think the second time, Mauricio Gomes, his dad, was there doing stuff with us. So again, I didn't know the history behind that, but obviously lucky now. Looking back, it was we got some good people.
Insane.
Yeah.
So,
There's a lot of connections. I can, as this story unfolds, there's a few other connections with people that we know today that we maybe crossed paths with years ago.
That kind of shows how basic the jiu-jitsu world was at that point then, when you were actually having to travel to London because there's nothing around to offer you round here. So that was the closest gym, was it?
Yeah, that was the only... I think there might have been... Braulio might have had a gym in Birmingham or somewhere, but for sure it was the two.
Yeah.
I think there was a guy, we trained under Clive, who had connections with some of the Bob Breen and some other... you have to get me on a name here, but it's a very famous Scottish martial artist. I think he was the first British black belt. He still competes. I've forgotten his name, but they were part of this crowd of high-level martial arts instructors in the country. Clive was one of those people. He wrote for Martial Arts Illustrated. He was a front cover person. He did stuff for Fight School on the telly.
He was on the Ultimate. What was it called? Where he was a coach on the TV. Wasn't he? And he had groups.
Yeah, that was so he was on Fight School, which was on Sky One, I think. Yeah. Anyway, but they knew each other, so it was already straight away. You kind of felt you had these connections, the fact that he trained with Dan Inosanto, Bruce Lee's top student. You know, that's great marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, but alluring for someone, as I say. I mean, go back beyond my judo day. In the 80s, we all wanted to be Bruce Lee and in the street and nunchucks, making your own nunchucks and sort of fighting. And so, it was kind of, that's the time I grew up in. Not quite the 70s where you would have been watching it as a teenager, but in the 80s still, there was a sense that there was still a real unknown there. Like it was the sort of martial arts were some sort of secretive, hidden thing that you're like, wow. And then Bruce Lee was like obviously the top of that. So I was, massive Bruce Lee fan.
So what was your way into just straight jiu-jitsu then? Was that kind of around that time?
No, a bit later. So in 2006, I got and I was unwell in 2006. I got a cancer diagnosis, which sort of threw my training a little bit. I was a red and black belt with Clive. I was due to take my black belt exam with him and Brendan and Clive's now wife, Kaz, and someone else, I think. But we were going to be his first black belts for a long time. He's only ever given a few black belts, and there hadn't been any for ages. Unfortunately, I got this diagnosis, cancer diagnosis. So I just sort of, training wasn't priority number one for a little bit. Although I kept going, I sort of slowly drifted away from that club, started doing more of my own stuff, more sort of training, more sparring with people rather than just going to the regular classes.
And is this all whilst going through the treatment, is it?
Yeah, so the treatment wasn't heavy duty treatment. I had to do a few things a few times. I had an operation and I had a couple of treatments. And I think by about end of 2007, September 2007, I got like all clear. But in that time, just certain things had changed. I couldn't train in the way I wanted to, so I had to adapt a few things. And then I wanted to do more hardcore training in a sense. I was looking for something. They were sparring a bit less. A few people had left that club. It didn't feel quite as. I wanted it to be tougher. We didn't spar enough, really. So we'd find other places to spar. But because in class, you couldn't guarantee, I'm going to go to class a couple of times a week. I want to at least get like 8 rounds of sparring in or something. Yeah. And we were getting maybe none, sometimes a couple. So it was like, I needed to find something else. So I was sort of searching around for jiu-jitsu schools. And I found one in Oxford. So the first time I started training was at Oxford. It was a Hodger Gracie affiliate on the Cowley Road over a tyre shop. And I just got in my car, found it and went up there and just joined in the class. I think a couple of Russian guys ran it and just paid this brown belt from Hodger's place to come down from London to teach. So it was really small, little boxing ring, and then like you trained around the side of the mat.
It's not still there, is it?
It's not still there. It's grown massively into Oxford OMAA, Oxford Martial Arts Academy. They moved, they've grown. They've got Max Campos now. I think it's a Checkmat gym now.
Oh, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that is the sort of journey of that gym. Obviously, it was a Hodger Gracie, but I'm pretty sure it's shifted and moved. I don't know how it's changed hands. I don't know that, but that's where we started. So I would go up in Oxford, but it's a 45-minute drive from Newbury, and then you get stuck in traffic. So it's a mission, to train. I was like having to go on my own, drive there, didn't know anyone. Just put a gi on, run around. Bought my Hodger gi. Had to buy the gi still though. that was a smart move. We don't do that. So yeah, I trained there. Got my first stripe under Bruno Zucana, one of Hodger's brown belts at the time.
Did you have to pay for that as well?
Didn't have to pay for that. No, that was cool. So that was my first stripe. Rolled with my first black belt there, and that just blew my fucking mind. It blew my mind. I thought I had a bit about me, and this guy was smaller than me, and he played with me like a toy. And I just was so... I remember going home and speaking to my other half, Charlotte, and just saying, I think my eyes were just out on stalks, like, this is... And I've got beaten up a lot by this point, but this guy was just amazing. Alex, I can't remember his surname, Brazilian guy, again, a Hodger Gracie black belt at the time. But he just made me feel like a baby, and I just loved that. That's what I wanted to know. That was probably the moment where I was like, I've got to do this. This is the thing.
You got that addiction.
This
is the thing.
because we spoke about it last week, I think, about the make or break of like that, where still today when people come to Newbury or whatever, trial class or whatever, and they're like, get, you know, rolled around a bit, and you either get the surge and you're like, I want to be able to do that, or potentially you'd be like, oh no, that's not for me. But obviously for you it was like, yes. Like
yeah,
after...
I can still feel the feeling now when I'm talking about that. Like, ooh, I kind of want that again.
Yeah.
You kind of want that again. That's what you're searching for almost. It was like, wow, that is magic. Right, how do I get to this?
Yeah, we can roll next week if you want.
Yeah. yeah. There's the magic there. What's this lapel doing? Yeah, but yeah, so that was really cool. But it was hard work getting there. Frankly, it was hard. It was a bloody nightmare. So I was travelling up there. I was working, doing whatever I was doing at the time. But I was always on the lookout for like other opportunities. Then I went to Thailand in 2000. This would have been 2010, and I trained a bit in Thailand, Lana Muay Thai in the north of Thailand. Did some sessions up there, really hot, really hard. But again, I was searching for something, and I came back from that trip and went on the line 2010, and I was just like, I can't bother to go to Oxford, anywhere else, and I found Basingstoke School of Martial Arts on there and read about it and was like, okay, the coach here has got a Roy Dean on his page. Oh, I recognise this guy. So Roy was like becoming a bit famous again through the YouTube stuff. So I was like, I'm going to go and check this place out. It's closer because it's still a drive, but it's like I can be door to door in like 25 minutes. Yeah, so it's an hour round trip. I can do this. So I did the same thing, just rocked up there, parked in the car park of this school, and like an actual, not a martial arts school, like a secondary school, and sort of wandered up to these steamy doors and peered in, and there was a bunch of mats led down and probably about 15, maybe 20 people max lined up on the mat, and I just sort of went in, and this was my introduction to sort of like the school that my coach is still there, and it was Kevin Hall, who at the time was a blue belt under Roy. And he had a friend of his who Steve Greenaway, who was a purple belt. So this was sort of early.
So this was before Paraestra.
Yes. Yeah. So this was before Paraestra. Yeah. So I would go there a few times a week. Monday sessions, Thursday open mat, and Friday. So I'd train probably three times a week if I could, but it was still an hour round trip plus. Then a few more. I was the first person from Newbury there. And then, like, I was like, come on, to a few people. They'd start coming with me. My friend Gareth from back in my earlier story. And then my friend Tom. Like, a few people started adding themselves. And James Clutton as well. So we would drive and pick people up. And I trained there probably, don't know when it would have been, I guess 2011 or 12. Something around that time was when I first started training regularly. 2011 maybe. I would say. I was a school teacher. I was trained to be a school teacher at the time. So my time was limited in that sense. It was like I was rushing around, trying to do and it was harder work than like what we've created now, which I'm grateful for. That's what we want to do. That's what the goal was. So yeah, going there and training. And then in 2014, I got my blue belt under Kevin and under Jeff. So by that point, Kev and Roy had parted ways, and Kev had then joined with Jeff Lawson, Mr. Ippon, Jeff Lawson, who was, I think, and they can call me out on this, I'm pretty sure at the time he was kind of going out on his own, but he was a black belt under Alex D'Souza. Yeah, so there was nothing to do with Paraestra at this point. So Jeff was. So when
Kev started training under Jeff, it still wasn't Paraestra.
No,
right,
wasn't Paraestra. No.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really. We were kind of like. The lineage was Roy, but then there was a gap there. But Jeff was a black belt, so he could kind of do his own thing. But I think he was trying to find a home.
Yeah.
He was under Alex D'Souza. That's where his black belt came from. D'Souza Dojo, which is again one of the earliest dojos in the country in doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's got lots of links to all sorts of people, and runs the Bournemouth comp and things like that. But but I got my blue belt, and the bunch of us that got it, it was definitely Jeff was there. Kev was a purple belt at that time, and he got his purple belt under Roy Dean. You can watch the Roy Dean stuff online. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
They video all those. You have to do all your techniques. So Kev had to kind of do a display of moves in front of his students with Roy or Steve Greenaway watching, and then had to spar like increasingly difficult opponents. And I think he had a real tough purple belt in his final round to get a guy called Ben, who's running a gym. I think it's in Canada. He's a Ben Dyson. He's a ADCC vet, and he was just a savage.
Because Roy Dean's, I think we spoke about this again. Roy Dean's the guy that still releases the videos now, doesn't he?
That's still something they do now.
Like
yeah.
the syllabus as such to how to get your next belt, isn't it? Yeah. So they're still using that same principle.
We got paperwork like of how to get your first stripe, second stripe, third stripe. That was written down, like moves you needed to know. So that was quite cool. I liked that, actually, because I had syllabus like that when I was under Clive at Clive Elliott's. You know, each belt had like what you needed to do, various ranges of fighting.
Which isn't something that a lot of people do now. It's not a thing.
I don't do it at all. No, it's interesting, really. I mean, I have ideas in my head of like, based on that, what people should, or I'd like them to be able to do, what I should be able to do, things like that. Kids classes, I think that's quite useful for kids sometimes. But yeah, it's not so much a thing. Maybe it should be. It's interesting. For the kids, I mean. I think adults like the freedom. I think that's one of the nice things about jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. But then do you reckon it's better off when people are starting out? Because you avoid any gaps to begin with by having been gone through.
Yeah, I do. I think the fact that, I went and started actually teaching people myself as a blue belt, which I know in some circles is frowned upon, and now I've been training a lot longer, I can see why. But so as I say, Kevin was a blue belt at the time we all started learning, but look where we all are. There's loads of black belts in that school now, high level black belts as well. There's lots of schools, there's lots of growth. Without him being I would say he was a pioneer of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in this region in the south, because without that, I mean, Oxford had a thing, and then London, and that was it. Or you come to the coast and you find Jeff. I don't know how much So someone had to do it. Someone had to kind of like be willing to put their balls on the line and go, fuck it, I'm going to open and I'm going to say I'm teaching this and I'm going to give it a go. And he did really well. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity, because without it, there's always someone leading the way, isn't there? Someone has to lead the way. He has his own story, but I know that Kev had been like a lifelong martial arts instructor, so he started instructing martial arts when he was much younger, kids, taekwondo, much more traditional route, but he diversified what he was doing into jiu-jitsu, but used the model he had, and I think that it worked really well.
You can tell that too, like the way he teaches is very clear. And I think sometimes people get kind of mixed up and stuff, and I think even though, like you said, Kev was either a blue belt or a purple belt when he started teaching, he was a very experienced just a teacher, like an instructor. I think that came through really obviously from the get-go, because obviously I started with Basingstoke. I think Kev was a brown belt, but I don't think he'd been a brown belt for too long when I started there. And he's just always been a very kind of clear speaker with kind of lots of brevity. He gives people the bits they need and doesn't give you the stuff you don't need. And I think that came through from, like you said, being an instructor for such a long time already. Yeah,
he's very focused on the technique.
There's also Roy Dean sensibility, I think, is still in him. Is that too?
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe he was like that already. I mean, I'm not sure. Because as I say, he had his own school. I know he travelled to the States to train under Roy for a period of time in order to get himself to that level. It wasn't like sort of Gracie University style sort of online thing. It was like he had to do what he had to do. He earned his blue belt, and that video's online as well, out in the States, getting beat up by Roy Dean's students. So, but yeah.
I think the argument, well, not argument, but I think like you said about sort of being the pioneer or going out, and the same with you, because if you hadn't have taken it upon yourself to go, all right, I'm a blue belt now, like, I don't know how it happened, but whatever, you know, I'm travelling all the way to Basingstoke, but I could just train in Newbury or start teaching in Newbury, your club would be years behind. If you'd have waited and gone, no, I'm not going to do it yet, no, I'm not going to do it yet, it would
Well,
be...
the thing is, I would never even started jiu-jitsu.
Well, that's it, yeah.
If, like, Newbury didn't start up, because
What
the way...
a blessing that would have been.
There's always negatives to these things, isn't there?
I'll probably be like 140 kg at this point.
Jesus.
Maybe dead. You could be dead.
Could be.
Well, you've got to say that, haven't you? Because
Yeah.
that's everyone in jiu-jitsu or MMA, if you say, oh, what would happen if you didn't find it? Oh, I'd be in prison or I'd be dead. Yeah, I'm not sure, mate, to be honest. I've seen that from two...
I'll probably definitely have diabetes or something.
No, that sounds legit.
But yeah,
Things
Well, saved your life, John.
I was introduced to jiu-jitsu through Sam and Ryan, coming to watch my brother train, who then trained at Newbury. Like, without that, like, I would never have picked up jiu-jitsu as a thing.
yeah. And that's the same as potentially you, because if Kev hadn't started teaching at Basingstoke as a blue belt, then
Yeah.
you'd have still been looking for somewhere to
Yeah,
train.
and I would have, I think, like, you know, as I say, I'd already been training for many years at that
Yeah.
point in various arts and stuff, but I knew that I liked the grappling. I felt like I was a pretty good stand-up striker. My boxing was pretty good. I always liked getting in a tear-up. Like, I sort of put your head in and just, you know, get punched, give one to take one, sort of, you know, or take one to give one. But then I'd found grappling. I was like, this is good. I like this.
So what was the...
You know.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, because
Come on,
we
guys.
had a question.
Well,
we had a
do you know what I mean?
question
It's
to
supposed
do
be
with,
an
like...
organised.
It's only episode 10. Give us a chance.
I mean,
Because we had
honestly,
one-
sorry,
folks, you should
coach.
see the state of this office. We're doing this in inverted commas.
It's not on the internet yet.
It's a studio.
It's fucking scary, is what it is.
Get back in your cage.
Right, sorry, yeah. They've brought me here against my will.
But we had a comment about, as you're talking about like street fights and stuff like that, was there ever any a time where you actually used jiu-jitsu?
Well, yes,
was it
physically, yes,
effective?
and also probably lots of times in a sort of more smart way.
Yeah.
If I put it that way. So I think jiu-jitsu's got lots to teach us, hasn't it? Yeah, one time I used it to confrontation. Actually, it was a confrontation between two friends of mine who we'd had a few too many drinks and started a fight with each other. And I clearly kind of suspected one of them was more to blame for this confrontation than the other because he was more aggressive. So I took him down and just mounted him in the park and just sat on him and, you know, pinned him down basically, whilst the other guy was able to get away. And then this guy was, my friend was not happy about it. But eventually, once the other person was out of sight, I was able to let him up, and then we sort of, you know, went off in our own separate ways. So that's probably the only time was actually against someone, a friend. Otherwise, it's just been to avoid those confrontations. I've been lucky enough to, you know, I'm older now, right? I'm getting up to nearly 46, I think it's, you know, but when I started jiu-jitsu, I was already kind of in that time of my life where, you know, you weren't getting out and getting into fisticuffs. Do you know what I mean? Like I wasn't. I would do a lot to avoid that then. So thankfully, I haven't really had to use it, but I've probably avoided some stuff just by thinking in a jiu-jitsu way, how I teach, like considering the space that you're in and how to avoid getting in a confrontation is more important than getting in one. I think that's probably what I've learned about martial arts more than anything.
Yeah, because whenever I help you with the kids class, and if you do like the technical stand up or something, that's what you sometimes bring that into a point of saying, well, if I can do a technical stand up and put space between me and my aggressor, then you're just going to walk away or say, like, sorry, mate, I'm not interested. I don't want to fight or anything.
Yeah.
And that does instill in your brain. And I think I touched on it from my story of when I got introduced to martial arts. It's sort of when I was getting into a few fights and stuff, and then all of a sudden you just don't, because you're like, it's just different things lead you down the path.
You learn how dangerous it is to get in a fight.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, real fights are pretty dangerous. Like, I had a few confrontations as a sort of younger youth. Like, I've had a knife put to my throat and threatened. I've been beaten up and kicked in the head in the street. I've been, broken noses. I've had, I've been on the bad end of a few incidents, but not since I really was training. That was all when I had the small man issues, and would get into these confrontations, with just being with my mates and just being a loudmouth little twat, really, and then paying the price a couple of times, and other times not, But when you start training martial arts, you realise, oh, this is serious, right? This guy can choke me out, or he can punch me, and just be, it's devastating, right? When you learn, I think that's one of the things that people miss before they do it. That's what we want to teach. I want people to learn martial arts so they'll protect themselves just by knowing how dangerous it is.
Yeah.
And how much they'll want to avoid that confrontation. You don't want to hurt the other person. You don't want to get hurt by them. There's often the other solution is more often there, and is if you head towards it.
And it's the misjudge of character as well, isn't it? Because you walk onto a jiu-jitsu gym and you've got people from all walks of life, different builds, different, whatever. And like you could look at someone on the street and, if you ever got into a confrontation with a little short guy with glasses on or whatever, and you might think that that's nothing, but they might be a black belt in this or a black belt in that, and
you just don't know.
And walking into a jiu-jitsu gym opens your eyes to that, because of how many different walks of life of people step into those mats, put a gi on, and then train, don't they? So, yeah,
that's the one thing I noticed. One of the New Year's, Christmas meals we had, walking through town, just looking back at the group of people, and it's like you would never see this diverse group of people anywhere else
if they didn't have jiu-jitsu as their...
Like, the one thing that brings us all together was getting on the mats and training.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing that comes up a lot of conversation about jiu-jitsu, is this idea of like the community it builds, and it's different than anything else and all that stuff. I'm still on the fence about that a little bit.
Yeah,
I think it builds an amazing community. I love the community I'm part of. But I also think there are other things that do the same thing. I just think it's about just bringing, however you find yourself being brought together in a group. I think we're social animals, as long as it's something positive in there. There's diversity in all sorts of groups. You could go to a church and find a group of people that are very different, and they all have this shared idea that brought them together. All right, certain sports, team sports, rugby might favour bigger, stronger people, and they build that particular mindset. But I still think there's a fair diversity. Football teams, whatever it is, your thing. Tribes, surfers, BMX riders. I used to skateboard. Like, the group of people that would do that, the skateboard was the thing we had in common. But like, everything else was different. Really, do you know what I mean?
So speaking of teaching things and bringing people together, we've kind of come up to the point where you probably started Newbury as its own entity.
Yeah.
What was the spark? What was the story behind that?
Well, yeah, it's been very organic, which I'm happy about. I think, so we got blue belts in around about 2014. I didn't train much the next I trained a bit, and then I got an injury or something.
Blue belt.
Yeah. I was nearly that guy. I was very much nearly that guy. But there was some opportunity closer to home to just just train. So myself and about 3 or 4 other blue belts from Basingstoke who lived in Newbury, we were picking each other up, which was great, but it also made that commute longer, because you had to drive around to like 4 different houses to pick people up and then drop them all off at the end of the night. So I could be leaving on a Monday at like 6 for a class at 7:30, and then getting home, it'd finish at 9, and I'll be home by 10:15. So it was a long chunk out of your evening, which was fine because I didn't have children at the time, and you know that was my hobby and my passion. Anyway, digressing, but yes, we had a place closer to home, so we just started training locally, like a couple of times a week, and then a few people got interested. Some girls and a couple of guys got interested in coming and seeing what we were doing. So we asked basically Kev, you know, would you mind if we did a bit of teaching? Nothing formal at this point. There was no advertising. It was just like, if someone comes in, can we show them an armbar? Basically, you know, that kind of stuff. And I think that I was going to say about the Roy Dean syllabus thing. When we were going through that, you had to show, like we'd be there, let's say an open mat on a Thursday, and I'd be working with James at the time. And Kev would come over and we'd go, oh, can we show you like these moves from the syllabus? So we do like armbar, we do, what we were doing at the time, like a tripod sweep or hip toss or whatever it might be, guard pass. And then he would critique it and go, oh, you need to do a bit more of this and tidy that up and things like that. So by the time we got to blue belt, we'd been critiqued on specific techniques all the way through, almost like whereby it felt like you could get to blue belt now and probably you're good at you know, you've got to know all the moves, but you might be a bit sketchy on a few things. No one's going to necessarily, if you're doing well in sparring and you know the moves and you're kind of looking after your training partners, you can get yourself up to blue belt. But back then we were lucky to have kind of been grilled a little bit, let's say, on like the specifics of that armbar. So I felt like I might not have the best armbar at that time, but I knew exactly what was needed, all the little pieces of the mechanics. So that was a benefit there. So, and also it meant, and I think Kev being a blue belt when he started teaching and knowing I was a school teacher as well, right? So at this point, I'm teaching in school. I've been a school teacher for probably like 6 years or something at that point. So I had my ideas about how to teach. I've trained at primary school teacher level. I was teaching in a secondary school. I was teaching special needs. It was my full-time job. So I had an idea of pedagogy and how to distill ideas and deliver them to different types of people. So I felt like I had that as probably my strong point, really. At least that's what I told myself.
And that's why people like, I don't know, John got so good so quickly, because you have a specialism in special needs.
It's highly likely, and I tailored things very much, you know, towards people like John who would come in, and I'd recognise straight away that there was some neurodivergence in the room, and therefore I would have to differentiate my lessons in order to cater for people like him. Yeah. And it's worked, you see, there you go. It's worked. He's almost getting good now. So then we just started teaching and it just sort of grew from there. A few more people started turning up. And I would say me and another person were doing it mostly. And that person was training more than me still, because just the way their life were. You know, being a school teacher full-time, pretty high intensity job. Don't go into that thinking it's fucking easy. It ain't. And time was harder for a while there. So I was.
You also were just about to have a baby, weren't you?
So I had my first child in 2017. So a lot sort of kicked off from about that point. Yeah, from about 2017. Few things changed. I sort of like became the only person who was teaching at the gym. And I was like make or break moment, really, to be honest. Like we had a baby at home. Some of the class times were not ideal for like for Charlotte. But I knew if I quit, I'm never going to get to Basingstoke on my 2-3 times a week anymore, on my 3 or 4 hour round trips. It's just no way I can justify being out of the house that long on a Friday night. But can I justify being out of the house on a Tuesday evening from like 8 until 10 when baby's asleep? And I kind of went, please let me, you know what I mean? Basically, I've got to do this. I didn't quit. And then my Saturday morning class that we were teaching at the time, I think I just moved it earlier. So it was a bit late because I was lazy. And like still like going out on a Friday night. If I could get out, you know, still in that mindset, even though we had children or a child. So I moved the class earlier so I could get in, teach, get home, so it didn't feel so much like I was leaving her in the lurch. And I'm just really, but it was cutting it fine there for a minute. It was nearly like, nah, I can't do this anymore. So I'm grateful to Charlotte in the first instance for kind of like obviously despite it feeling at the time like, gosh, she's got to let me do this. But she was obviously able to see that it was my passion, and we worked around it. But you've got to make these adjustments, haven't you? So we did. And then from 2017, late 2017, the school really started like becoming a thing I focused more and more on. And we started getting more people, and then you guys all started training sort of in that next few years, 2018 and so on.
So
we've got people in.
Were you, when you had Una then, were you purple belt?
No, blue belt.
Oh.
Yeah, blue belt. I was a long time blue belt.
Oh,
so
okay.
that's our whole people at blue belt for ages because I fucking did. But it was fair. It was fair enough. That's exactly. I felt. I feel like. I got my purple belt in 2019.
And that was quite soon after the kind of patch over to Paraestra.
Yeah.
Because you got your purple belt
from Yuki Nakai, which was just like, again, what I said at the beginning of the story about watching videos in my halls of residence in 1998 and buying stuff online. In that time, in the early 2000s, where I first watched things like Choke with Hicks and Gracie and saw Yuki Nakai. So that was just the fact that we ended up being affiliated with Paraestra took me right back to being like, sort of 20 years old, and sort of, most people didn't know who he was, but I was trying to find my old VHS to take along to the first seminar he did at Basingstoke to get him to sign it. And I never found that thing. And then we got connected with Paraestra, and I got my purple belt from Yuki Nakai Sensei in 2019. Very grateful for that connection that has been forged. But also, again, like I say, Kev's my instructor. And Jeff. I look to those guys in the UK, especially to, and my other instructors and training partners. That's where most of the learning comes from, right? It's the person who's rolling with you right there, And
now you've got students of your own that you've taught from scratch.
Yeah.
Up to brown belt.
Up to brown belt.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah. So it's me and Arta are the black belts at the school now, but Arta had been training previously and in Poland and trained under Kev as well. So he is he's my peer. He's my peer who kicks my ass, but he's my peer. But yeah, it's nice to have some students now that have stuck it out with me, like John, all the way from coming in looking like an overweight chef. I thought he was a chef for about 2 years. What was that big white T-shirt he was wearing? It was a moo-moo with some food down the front of it. It turns out he was just an overweight guy who hadn't found his calling, and then he found it in jiu-jitsu. But now, a brown belt of Paraestra, of Newbury. So, and that's, awesome to see. Yeah, cool. And also Ben, I think, started with me as well. Also a brown belt.
Yeah, quite right.
Probably my first brown belt was Ben. But Ben had a solid martial arts past as well, judo and some other things, which you could tell straight away the first time you rolled with him. But yeah, definitely you're probably, in terms of like the journey that John's been on, from my perspective, from that fat chef to
not a chef.
to well known sort of like as a really strong jiu-jitsu player in not just at Newbury but just across like the south really. John's to see that growth and how it's sort of helped you in many ways. You always talk 100%. About it, but to see that, and it's just like, that's awesome. And I think it's to do with everybody, and all those things just fall into place. Luck plays a massive part in all this. It wasn't some great plan. I just didn't quit at just keeping. There was a moment where you could quit, don't quit. So the key thing, right, in jiu-jitsu is don't quit. And then you think, well, what's life? Don't quit.
Well, they say
tough things that you guys talk a lot about on here, about difficult things, and what bonds you and people together, I think, which shouldn't be overlooked, is that you just didn't give up, right? And you can't give up. You've got to keep putting one foot in front of the other
Yeah.
and keep going, moving forward. And it doesn't matter if you've got a plan down the road. Just keep moving forward in a positive way, and good things. Hopefully, won't always. There'll be bad things as well, but plenty of good things can happen. And you could go along that journey I've just described, and there could be any number of moments where I just did something else. And, or Kev didn't do that, or maybe I found a different strategy. I mean, we're all in that. But to have Newbury, to know that if people in Newbury want to start this thing that we all love, it's there. We've created that. So that's my proudest achievement in jiu-jitsu is not my black belt. My proudest achievement is just having doors that people can come through 7 days a week now and just fucking lose themselves on the mat for a bit. That's the main thing. That's the bit where I'm like a legacy type thing. It's like, I did that. Even if Newbury BJJ closes doors tomorrow, I'll be proud of that. That happened and a lot of people got involved and it was fun.
That wouldn't be ideal because it's the in-house comp.
Yeah, let's hope. It's not shut doors tomorrow. There's plenty of people waiting to fight.
Not me.
Do you ever find when you don't get to train,
it's all got very serious, isn't it? I mean, chatting away, not my usual thing.
But do you find it gives you an unbalance mentally or like a struggle in any way?
Oh, what, training?
Not training.
Oh, not training. Well, I've had a nose operation in October, hurt my knee before that. Like, my black belt so far has been pretty sketchy, I would say, in terms of how much are you improved as a black belt? Well, not much. But I still try but it's finding a way around, isn't it? I trained yesterday with this face guard thing. It's not very comfortable, gets pulled across my nose a bit. I think it probably puts the other person off quite a lot as well. So are you really trying? But at least I'm getting a sweat on and I'm moving around with people. And
looks cool.
It looks cool.
Looks like Batman.
I look like a weirdo. But it's, it's finding a way around, isn't it? Because we need it. I need it physically because I start seizing up if I don't do something. And also mentally, just to get away and see people and actually...
Shut off.
Move.
Else.
Shut off and move a little bit, really. That's what I find. It's moving. It's being in my physical body and not in my head.
Yeah.
I
find as soon as I start rolling, I just forget everything. Like, people ask me after.
When I roll with you.
But I mean, like, people ask me.
Don't forget to grab that lapel, though, do you? Somehow that's not being forgotten. Oh, he's got it again.
But people always ask me after a roll, like, "Oh, what did you do here?" It's like, I can't remember. I'm just like free flowing, like I'm just completely out of my mind.
Memory.
Yeah, and just going with the flow. And sometimes I try new things without think about it, and it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But just being completely out of your mind, it's great.
Powerful tool, right? And again, like I say about community, I mean, that you can get that from other things. You get that from surfing, or you get that from certain things. But certain things are more powerful in that. I think jiu-jitsu, people would call it, human chess, but played at a very fast pace. That's the difference, right? You could play chess moves slowly, think about your move, but this is you get good by being able to put these moves into place one after another very quickly, and obviously the better the move you play, the more success you'll have.
Yeah.
But that's why it takes time on the mat for most people to just have done that hundreds, thousands of times until it becomes like a smoother thing that just comes naturally. And then some people will get that quicker than others, right? Some people just are more attuned to their physical environment than other people. I think often those are the people who, like John, for example, you have a way I think that I can't do. You tell me, I thought this move, and you'll tell it to me. And I'll just go, no, you have to show me.
Or watch a video.
Or actually do it on me.
He'll watch a video and then come in and be like, I've seen this on Instagram. And then it's like, I can't do that either.
Oh, yeah. So that, I don't know what's happening in your brain, but it's not what's happening in mine.
None of us know what's happening in John's brain.
It's autism.
It's got to be
yeah, exactly. It's something, but it works very well in this scenario, doesn't it? It's a useful thing. I mean, I remember I'd play video games or whatever in like the 90s, and I'd be in bed just like walking through these video games. So I have got a visual memory in that regard. But I don't know if it's lessening as I get older, or I've been punching the head too many times or something. I don't know. But it's definitely a benefit for this kind of game that we're playing with each other.
See, I'm a physical learner. I can't do any of that. I train with like Matt. He can watch an Instagram video and then he'll come in and try it on me, like pretty down to the detail, if you know what I mean. And I'm just like, what the fuck?
You have to drill it like 8 times.
I have to drill
or
it,
something.
or like I'll do like when you're doing a class and it'll be like a good example is that lasso sweep. You know, the put your foot between there and then sweep them over your head. Like we did a whole however long on lasso, and the one thing that I've really come out with is that. And so I'll just use that like the whole time of the section of whatever you're training at the time for that month or however long it is. I just try and dial in on like one or two of the actual things and then take them away, rather than trying to like hyper focus on loads of stuff.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu is like very, very complicated, isn't it? But also the goal of it is very straightforward. If you can, and you only ever need to get to the end, let's say the submission or the position. But there's just lots of avenues you can take. Some are good, some are bad, you know. But yeah, you don't need all the techniques. I've said this to students in art. My way of teaching, I think, or my way of thinking is good as to be as good a teacher as I can be is my goal, right? Not to be as good a jiu-jitsu practitioner necessarily. I think competitors are better akin to that. That's not me. I've never said I was a competitive jiu-jitsu player. But I think what I try to do is I try to gather information, get good enough at it to share it in a way that other people can take on board. But you don't need, as a student of mine at least, you don't need to come to my class and go, Byrne just did like 5 lasso things there. You just maybe need one of them, right? And I only need one of them in sparring.
But you need to be able to know.
But I might need to know more, because like you might pick up one of those things. Someone else might get 3, or someone else might get 1, but it's not the one you got. So it's just it's available. It's like literature, available literature. Read this, read that. Choose what you think's important. How do you bring your own subjective opinions to that? What's your opinion on this? What works in your? People say, what works for your game? Bruce Lee. It talks about that, right? It's about you take all the information and then you shed everything that's useless.
Yeah.
And what you're left with is your game, your ability to do the things that work for you. I'm thinking it's slightly different. I feel like I need to, whether I'm right or wrong here, I need to know this broadly. I need to know the way broadly, whereas you might only need to know the way more directly for you. Until you're the head coach. And I was, I'm sitting here, 2 of you guys coach classes and have done for years. Like Sam was the first person who started coaching with me, and John. We've got a few coaches now, but like I think once you start being a coach, you can. There's 2 ways to go. You either broaden it, like I'm saying, that's what my attempts have been, or you become very specialist in the kind of coaching that you do. You coach your game or things that you think work for other people's, because maybe you've got a smaller group of students in a no-gi session in the morning or something like that. You can but as a coach, you have to recognise that it can't be all about you. I think it's important. So if you want to, I felt that that's what's kept me positively minded, because I can get beat up on the mats by plenty of people, but I do keep positive by thinking, oh, no, I've got plenty of moves and plenty of ways to teach them that maybe they don't have, and that's proven true by the fact that you might have 30 or 40 people sitting in your lesson, right? So if that wasn't happening, maybe I'd second guess myself even more, but I definitely do that. But I think that keeps you a little bit fresh. Like I would hope that my classes are you don't necessarily know what you're going to get. I don't teach absolutely the same thing every time, except on a Tuesday lunchtime where it's just flow rolling for a bit and then you get into it. That always happened. But on a Monday, you don't know what the warm-up's going to be. You don't exactly. You got a rough idea, but you don't know for sure. So it keeps you on your toes, right? I think. It keeps me on my toes, because it's like I plan every lesson I ever teach. I write down everything I am ever going to do, so I can just refer to it. I really very rarely wing it. Very rarely. I can plan it more quickly now than I used to be able. But that's probably my teacher background,
And do you have set ways of doing stuff like I just mentioned, like we tend to do like position or something for like a set amount of time. Have you developed that over your years of teaching? Like you sort of know how long to teach a particular position for or something before it sort of gets boring, not boring for the students, but, you know, like have you sort of like dialed that down to, oh, I'll do knee on belly for 3 weeks and then I'll lead that to something else?
See what people are doing, how much there is, what's the breadth of that particular position, how does it play into the crowd, you know, getting across what I know, and then giving people enough time to kind of try to get their head around it.
Yeah.
And then see it again. Some of you saying about like, you know, what's changed? Was that a question? What's changed in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Well, there's two things that have come to my mind when that question. First one is no-gi. That's probably the biggest change, I would say. Not that I think it's more important. I'm not even going to get into that debate about gi, no gi.
Oh, I was going to ask that.
No, I'm not. I just think, but I would say no gi is the biggest change in jiu-jitsu in that, as I said earlier, like when we first started doing jiu-jitsu, it was either you do it in the gi or you're doing MMA. There wasn't really anything, there was no such thing as no gi. So now people are training like that. So that's a big change because I do think there is a big difference between the two. Okay, positionally, they're pretty similar, like the same people tend to do both of the things, but now you get a bit more diversity in that, and it's the goals are the same. Yeah, you've got to pin someone and make them submit. But I think that's a big difference. That has boomed, and it's all good. It's all good. But I don't coach much no-gi because I don't feel as knowledgeable in that realm. So I'm not going to pretend I am. I don't train it very often. So other people are more equipped in that realm than me, and that's why they do it. Sam, John, Arta, these guys are better in. I think they've got a broader no-gi game than I have. And the other thing was
you were waiting for your name
what
to be
technique said about techniques, what to
Mason sat
teach.
there having a tear in the corner.
One day, Mason. Yeah.
Witness me.
I think would be certain techniques that we used to just getting rid of shit that don't work. Getting rid of shit that don't work. I learned stuff that when I was starting out, that Kev was teaching back in 2011 or whatever, that I don't teach anymore. Really, it's still there, but I don't really. It's not a focus. The game's broadened, and you're trying to refine and get better, right? So sometimes I feel like my jiu-jitsu is old-fashioned in a sense. It's like the goal is to pass on information and get people to get good real quicker than I did. Because there wasn't, you don't have to travel for a 3-hour round trip. The guy who's teaching you is not a blue belt, and everybody's a white belt on the mat. Now it's like all belt levels. You can train 7 times a week in your own town. It's tried and tested. There's Gina. It's so much more available to people.
John said before, again, is having those levels on the mat. So even when you've got your class, 9 times out of 10 you'll have a couple of purple belts, a couple of brown belts now in the classes. So like there's a lot of focus on people that need help. Like you can ask someone that's high level rather than having to try and get your attention all the time. You've got John, Sam, Harry.
It's not the blind leading the blind anymore.
Yeah.
It was the Wild West. Like back in the day, we would just wing it. You just had, like I say, both times I started, probably like people still start today, but just turning up in a car park in a town outside of 40 miles from home, and just walking in some doors with no one you're going to know, and not knowing what to expect, giving it a bash. Now it's like, it's just a bit different now, isn't it? But that's the great thing about it. But see the speed that people make progress is partly to do with people they're training with. But I would also say it's like, if I was spending my time teaching what I was learning 12, 13 years ago, you'd take as long as it took me to get my move out, longer, because there's stuff there that not as effective. And I think that also makes good coaches, right? Try and get rid of stuff that ain't any good, or not necessarily, but refine things. I focus. I would say the key focus for me on what we teach is guard passing, guard retention. It always plays a part in what some part of my lesson be like. You're passing the guard in somewhere, or you're retaining your guard, or attacking, trying to off balance someone in some way or another. That wasn't even like a thing. The techniques being taught 10 years ago were techniques in isolation. This is an armbar. That's very useful, but the other stuff was kind of like you work your way out. How did you get past this person's legs? Just try this. It wasn't. We didn't do it as much. There was less focus on it. I think now it's heavy and it's important. It's the main thing you're doing, right? When you actually realise what you're doing in jiu-jitsu.
So we're about an hour and 10 minutes in.
Okay.
So just.
I'm not known for being sitting there quiet. Sorry.
No, it's
you
fine.
can
It's
edit
good.
half
No,
of it
this
out.
is your episode, mate.
Yeah.
This is it. I just to let you guys know, and we're kind of towards the end of what we'd say is time, but maybe
That's fine.
some questions if you've got any particularly
Yeah,
good,
I just want
good ones at
on
the
that,
end.
what you just said there. Do you think that that's changed because of the introduction of like IBJJF rule set in competing in jiu-jitsu? Because when you said like originally when it was like submission grappling or as such, you know, before.
Yeah, submission grappling would be what it was.
Yeah, I think that's how I think I started.
That's
out
how
with
it would have been
submission
titled.
grappling,
Yeah. Very close to MMA though. It was still
Yeah.
kind of in that realm. There wasn't.
But
Competitions were not a thing.
with the whole like guard retention and guards and passing guards, there wasn't, when I first started as well, there wasn't much focus on that sort of thing. And like you said, it was more like basically get to the back, choke them out, or if you get to the side, pull an armbar. But because when you went to compete, it would probably be like in an MMA background or a submission grappling sort of thing, and points wasn't a thing. So it didn't really matter. You didn't have to worry about, you know, there wasn't any get to side control, make sure you hold them for 3 seconds, and then start moving on. It wasn't really a thing. So do you think that jiu-jitsu sort of developed a little bit because of that? And now like people are always, when you teach sometimes, not necessarily you, but like when people teach jiu-jitsu, it's like they kind of have this mental focus on like, you'll teach someone to pass a guard and get to the back because you know there's points there if they're going to go and compete, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it has made a difference to my teaching. I've had to learn, you know, I sort of learned the point scoring system late or later. It wasn't discussed really. Even in those classes in the gi at Basingstoke, we weren't talking about, right, this gets you 2 points.
No.
Wasn't really. Well, there people were going out and competing. There were small competitions around at that time. But it was more, and I think that's right. I mention it from time to time. We play some games in the coloured belt classes and stuff. But I still think it's a martial art. It took me a long time to get away from the MMA side of it. I'd always think, I'm not using that. It wouldn't work in a fight, you know, type thing. I still think, you know, it's a self-defense art, it's a fighting art. But once you kind of get good enough that you can then start playing around with it, it becomes fun and a game. That's kind of going to keep you in it a bit longer, I think. That's where the longevity comes in. When you're not getting in any fights in the street, you feel like you know some moves, and then you kind of get to that sort of purple belt level where you can just sort of play around. At that point, you're doing jiu-jitsu because it's like it's super fun. Just to sort of move in that way and be, you know, just. But I think well, I'm losing my train of thread now, but yeah, it's useful to teach with points. That has changed the game. Certainly in some gyms, I'm sure they are very heavily competition focused. Super competition focused. They'll have competition teams. They'll be under a banner of, let's say, a check mat or whatever, and their goal is to win IBJJF competitions, get people up the point scoring lists, get them into ADCC, you know where it reach the top of the mountain. We're a small club. I think in a comparative terms, Paraestra has a background in MMA with Yuki, right? That's what he's born from, that cloth. You know, that's what he's cut from, and then he's developed his jiu-jitsu. But I don't feel that we're a heavy competitive team. There's no pressure from the top to be like, you need to get this. And I think that does happen elsewhere. Does that change the environment in the gym? I can't speak to that, but I know we have an environment in our club where I want people to be, and we've got some good guys and girls going out and looking to compete, doing their thing, but also just people who come in and train once a week just to...
So I'd add there, I think that you have a lot of choice now, because there are a lot of schools and schools that are owned by different kind of organisations, whether it be Gracie Barra, Checkmat, or Paraestra, obviously in our area of the country, or whoever else. And I think people have a choice now what style of school they want to go to. If you think I want to be really good in competition, I'm going to go to a competition school. For me personally, I think like you were just saying, that you can go to a smaller, not as competition kind of focused school, but where everyone's having a good time, and you can meet a bunch of new people who all do things outside of the gym and stuff like that, and do really well in competition. We've got tons of students, and some that are competing at a super high level. But if you go to a super comp oriented school, you may not get the other stuff. You may not get way to meet new people, friends, go out with them and stuff. It might just be turn up and train and that's it. And so I personally would argue for, if you're all having a good time and you're lifting each other up and you want to compete, you're going to be just as good, really.
I'd add to that.
I think just in terms of our, let's say, if you could look at it through who's got what belts at our school, I think we stand up. Those stand up against any of those other schools.
Yeah, I think
obviously
quite a
you
lot
get
of
the
us
outliers. Certain blue belts are just fucking ridiculously good. They just athletic. They get it. They train every day of the week. They're like super. They're young. They're hungry, and they've got the access to the knowledge, and they go for it. And that's great. We have those, and we can access that. But I think they're just people moving more quickly through the game. But you'll wait on blue belt for a long time at Newbury until I think you're ready for a purple belt. And I don't want to ever be giving things away, and that means that you can stand up to people of a similar style, similar in the sense of weight division, age, all that stuff. You could pretty much take a Newbury BJJ blue, purple, brown belt anywhere and go, yeah, look, they're okay over there. Maybe not against that gym's best person if you're not our gym's best person, but like you're not going to be out of your depth anywhere. And I think people travel and train, and to your point, Sam, like you competed not long ago in that no-gi tournament. You were kind of like weren't training massively at the time. You certainly weren't like doing all the gym sessions as to sort of bring everything up. You were just enjoying your jiu-jitsu and went, I'll throw my hat in the ring. And then, tapped out a guy who's kind of on like the scene, getting paid money on various other shows, right? So it just shows that our level is right there. But what do you choose to get out of jiu-jitsu? I think a lot of people come to Newbury, they choose the less sort of, broadly speaking, just a nicer, longer term view of the journey. But if they want to go and compete, like we've got Cameron at the moment who's really like pushing. He's working with Tom Baker, one of Kev's black belts, one of Jeff's black belts, who again, his coaching style is fantastic and super knowledgeable. Tom was one of those people who was young and beating me up when we were white belts together. But yeah, I like that we've got those links. If you want to go and do this, I'm not going to put my hand up and say I've got all the time to coach you through that high level of competition. I'll give you these tools, I'll give you this playground to practice in, essentially, and then look, I can point you in the direction of this guy over here. If you want a bit more knowledge at that level, there's your guy. Go do it. And I'm supering. I want to make sure people always feel comfortable doing that, But as long as they're aware that what they've got here is where they're really honing their stuff. Is in your everyday playground. That's where most of the stuff happens for people.
Speaking of the journey, and maybe we'll call this the last question, perhaps for time.
Then we've got that one last question we'll leave right to the end.
What was that one?
From Ashley.
Oh yeah.
We'll leave that to the last closing.
So we'll do John's question that we've already got prepped, and then one last question. Then I've got a question for you, Mason, as well. Right at the end. It's not going to take long. Don't worry.
I've got time. I've got time.
Be something about Japanese or.
For you,
yes.
Everyone says about like what belt is the most difficult to get through.
That's cool that you're about to ask that, because I wanted to ask that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What for you with like life and jiu-jitsu? What's been the toughest belt to get through?
And do the toughest and do the best as well. So you do,
Oh yeah, this is a tough question.
Because I think it's different for everyone. The toughest belt. depending
Toughest
on what
belt.
you go through in life and the training that you can get in.
If I talk from a purely jiu-jitsu perspective, it's blue belt, classic answer, because I was like 5 years at blue belt, and I got beat up a lot. I tried to change my game. I went from like just being an aggressive top player with an aggressive style. He was small and didn't often, got beaten up trying to do it, but I had to reevaluate my head forward attacks. When someone like Pete at Basingstoke would always say, "Oh, you're just giving me this because you're too aggressive." So you learn from people's little comments like that. So I sort of just sat on my ass for a lot of time and got beat up a lot because I was terrible at guard. But by the time I got my purple belt, I was like, I understand that now a bit more. So that was tough. I got beat up a lot, and lots was going on, building the club at that point as well. So blue belt was tough, and it felt like it went on for a long time. But I've never really followed. Yeah, I've never really been hunting the. I had kids with my daughter at that time and various things. So there's lots going on. So there's that one. White belt was obviously, if you take it from the first day I put a white belt on, it took a long time to get my blue belt. But, I wasn't really training jiu-jitsu specifically for a long period of that time. So really my journey started, I started training in Oxford, but really it started with Kev at Basingstoke. But white belt was a long one. And I think, you just learn so much. You learn to get really just beaten up. But I'd already been beaten up a bunch of times. Never was that wasn't a problem for me. Getting punched and kicked and choked wasn't a problem. Back then, I wasn't too far. I quite enjoyed that element of it.
I think that's quite important to add to like people that are trained now, like lower belts as well. It's like is it like the importance or like you don't like getting beaten up, like getting tapped or whatever is actually part of the journey.
Oh yeah,
like it's a massively
you have to get tapped.
part.
You have to be tapped. I mean, everyone's got an ego. Don't leave it at the door. You need it. It's part of you. Just don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Just don't be a dick. Like that just goes for, again, jiu-jitsu reflects life. Life reflects jiu-jitsu. Don't be a dick. I mean, where's that not useful? Just don't be a knob.
The bedroom. The bedroom. Oh no, that's don't have a dick.
No, bring that there and bring your ego. But yeah, blue belt. I really enjoyed purple belt. Getting it from Yuki and just training at purple belt was great fun. Felt like I had more time and was like focused on myself a little bit. Brown belt, was my life I had a crazy few years. So I don't know anyone who wants to get a belt. I wasn't hanging out for my black belt when I got it at all. I'd said to Sean not long before, I really need to start putting effort into my own game and developing this. And I had like these plans for things I thought I needed to do to get my black belt, or to feel like I'd owned that thing if it ever came. And then it came, and I didn't feel like that. And then I was like, as I said in my sort of acceptance of it or whatever, like, take someone offers you something, you accept it graciously, and then you grow into it. So I'm growing into it still slowly, but proud of it. But brown belt was definitely hard because there was just so many life events going on between 2022 and 2024 that it just made being in class and teaching. I mean, that was my saviour, right? I had to be there. It's my job. So that's a benefit. One of the great benefits of me starting jiu-jitsu and starting being coaching is that I don't get to not train. So double whammy of like, I want to be there because I enjoy it, but also on those wet Saturday mornings that for most of my life were spent with a hangover, essentially in bed, are now spent on the mats teaching people, and have been now since like 2017. So like that's now normal. Yeah. But there's wet Saturday mornings where you're like, fuck this, I want to just stay and cozy up and roll over, and I haven't had any lions, and you've got kids, and that changes the game. But it's there, and I've got responsibilities, and I think that is, I don't tend to be someone who, once I start something, I tend to finish it. I've never finished at the top of my class, but I've also not been the person who's like quit.
Coral belt incoming.
incoming. Me and Una were trying to work this out the other day. How many years? She was like, when will you be a red belt? That's the next belt. And I was like, I think it's like 97 or something like that. I think I worked out.
It's 40 years at black, isn't it?
It's something crazy. It's something like I'll be 90 something. And I was like, maybe not. See,
maybe I might be able to beat you up then.
You might get your purple belt.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You'll never be able to beat me up, mate. You might be able to heel hook me or tap me, but you'll never be able to beat me up.
Yeah. I'll take that.
Did you have one before Ashley's or?
No.
Yeah, what was your one to me?
Let's do that right
Oh,
at the
God.
end.
All right. So Ashley came out with a question. What's worse, getting heel hooked by a white belt or cancer?
As a black belt now, it's probably getting heel hooked by, isn't it? How am I going to live that down? No, God, Jesus. Cancer's nothing compared to getting heel hooked by a white belt. The pain of that, Jesus, you're not going to tap out. You're going to be dealing with knee issues. It's going to put you out for weeks. I'm going to be miserable. Like
knee brace.
Yeah, Jesus, no, that's not happening. That's not happening. That's a rule you set yourself, right? Don't be tapped by a white belt. So I avoid them all now, just so I don't have to deal with my own shit. No,
that's an easy answer.
No,
right. This is it. This is the last question, and it's not for our esteemed guest.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you too.
Thanks for coming
on. Yeah,
you're our first proper guest.
Yeah.
So thank you.
If anyone's got any more questions, I'm sure you haven't. I've pretty much filled it all in. Yeah. Talk for ages.
The other questions were answered as we went through.
And we can always do, if people listen to this and then think, oh, this is a question for coach or whatever. And sometimes it's nice to be able to ask questions to your coach when they don't know it's you
like
asking the question anonymously. So we could do a round two.
Can I say one last thing, actually?
Absolutely,
just to shout out to everyone who is a student at Newbury, BJJ, if you're listening to this. And, we're all, that community is really the thing that matters the most, I think. It's just like, come along, have fun. If you're not training jiu-jitsu, but you're listening to this podcast, come train. Yeah. Because it's a great bunch of people who are so diverse. Like Mace was saying, I was being, flippant earlier about other things. Jiu-jitsu really is like, it does have a great broad range of people who train it. So, whatever you're doing, people seem to find someone else who's like, oh, you're into that woodworking thing, are you as well? Oh, yeah. Or, oh, you like doing this, or you like going to the pub, or you like food, or you like taking walks with the dogs. It's just, people from all walks of life, a lot, especially from a small, predominantly sort of white, British market town. We've got some diversity in our club that you might not find, which is lovely. Which is really
like networking
lovely
at the same time.
Which is a sign of good times with the development of our town into something a bit more interesting and diverse, but also that those people from all walks of life are feeling comfortable to walk in a jiu-jitsu gym and stay there, which is awesome.
But sometimes I wish I could just when you talk to someone and they'll say to you about wanting to train, like I've had a few people that come to me and they're like, oh, I want to train, or whatever. And I know, well, the only thing that not the only thing, but probably one of the biggest things that's stopping them stepping foot into that gym is just the nerves of walking through the door. Yeah. And you kind of just want to
just grab them
and drag them in, and then after a week they'll just be like, oh, what was I worried about?
Starting something is always the hardest thing, right? So the belt, that's an old cliche as well, isn't it? But and if people want to ask me questions in the club about how do I get better, or what do I need to do to get my stripe, do that. I do think people don't ask questions enough. Maybe not in front of ask questions in class, but come to me and say, oh, Bernie, how do I get my next stripe or whatever? There's nothing wrong with that. I think people misjudge the idea that you can ask about those kinds of things. Why am I not is a bit more hardcore, give me my purple belt, I deserve it, or talking about stuff like that is a bit maybe not. But if you're legitimately trying to work out how to get better, then the people around you who have already achieved what you're looking for are good sources of that information.
Me and you have had those conversations.
You come and ask me questions like that. You've got a particular journey about to take place in your life, and you're trying to manage that in your mind against progress, and how do you stay relevant and all these kind of things. do it. That's a good idea. Like that is part of, like, I see that as part of my job, is to help you. I help 30 people in a room trying to learn that technique and get around them as much as possible. But also, you can ask me.
You're better off having that awkward conversation than potentially getting stuck at a belt for another year.
And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be awkward. I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think. Don't send me a list of who you tapped. Don't do that. Don't do that, please. I've had that. Yeah, I've had that. People sending me lists of who they've tapped and the colours next to them. No names. But like, that happens, right? People do funny things. Don't do that, but do say, what do I need to work on, or how do I, what would you recommend I did? I might not have the answer, but don't feel bad about asking. You should be open. Be open to criticism. Be open to conversations. I think that's very important. We should all be willing to hear things we don't want to hear, as well as things we do.
Yeah.
We have to take the knowledge from your brain and not just the knowledge from your jiu-jitsu on the mats.
Possibly.
Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense?
Well, not just mine, but just in general, the people around you, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and because that's what it's there for, right? That's why knowledge is useful. Like
knowledge is power.
Schools of learning are useful. People have read stuff, done stuff that you may not yet have. You pick their brains. If you think you know it all. And lots of people do come to jiu-jitsu, think they've done something, they've had a fight, they're tough, and then they go, oh man, it's different. And I think that again goes for life. Like, people a bit older might have seen or heard things that you think are like, Brian, wow, this happened. No one's ever done this before. Yeah, probably. And then when you get older, you realise that people have been doing that shit for thousands of years and passing that knowledge on, and you just have to go look for it. Jiu-jitsu as fighting is forever, isn't it, really?
Right.
So if you've been tuning in on a weekly basis, you will know last week or 2 weeks ago, you said, I'm going to learn a new Japanese word every week. And I'll tell you on the podcast, and I'll be the Japanese translator, man. Don't go on Google now. So what's your Japanese word of the week, Mason? I need a tumbleweed.
Did you do judo last week? Was that it?
No, Sam taught me that.
Oh, you taught me.
Yeah, that means the gentle way.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And what does jiu-jitsu mean?
The gentle art.
Well done.
Yeah. Well, actually, Daisy said that you're wrong.
Daisy?
She said it's called the soft martial art.
But it's a loose, like, that's
She's also
generally
not
what it
Japanese.
means. It's not a direct translation to a word, is it? It's a meaning. Gentle to
I'll get
soft.
back to you on that one.
Right.
I wanted to be mentally prepared to have my head coach here today, so can you not distract me with mindless details?
This is also about being able to keep each other accountable.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh.
like owning up
There
for
you
the
go.
plastic bottle that I left in the gym.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
And then taking some flack for it.
I did
And
actually. Yeah.
it's
And the
all
racial
right.
comments.
I literally said to John last night, I was like, why didn't I just let the kickboxers take the rap for it? Why did I send that message like, oh no, sorry guys, that was mine? Like, what a fucking idiot.
Jiu-jitsu has taught you integrity.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephen Byrne.
Thank you for
It's
coming.
been really good. Do you want to
Oh yeah, count
count
us out.
From where?
From now?
No, what number?
Wherever you want, mate.
100. Right, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Nice.